My name is Kemal Pervanic. I was born in Bosnia in 1968. Bosnia was part of former Yugoslavia. It was a very diverse country with people coming from many different backgrounds, nationalities, different cultures. And this is something that we celebrated for most of my life. You know, we were just all the same. And most of us actually declared ourselves as Yugoslavs. Unfortunately, this came to an end towards the end of the 1980s when my family and many ordinary families in former Yugoslavia experienced extraordinary hardship. Our fathers were losing their jobs. For those people who were still in employment, their pay was not regular. Sometimes it was for months late. So this created a climate which was exploited by certain politicians who started promoting the politics of nationalism. So these politicians started saying, well, we cannot live together anymore. So, we have to divide the country, which unfortunately led to the beginning of the disintegration of former Yugoslavia. And many ordinary people like myself became caught up in this political battle. From living my life together with my neighbors, Serbs and Croats and others, I found myself being targeted by my Serb neighbors who wanted my family land because they wanted to create an ethnically pure Serb land. And during this period, I could see, Muslims being persecuted in eastern Bosnia. You could see images of people being killed, yet I didn't want to believe that my neighbors would attack me one day. It was a very frightening day. Shells started landing on the village. I ended up in this riverbed and it was packed with people. It was like a tin of sardines. You had very old people. You had young mothers with babies, but incredibly, not even babies cried. They just kept quiet. And the shelling continued all night long. And luckily no one died. The next day we were ordered to surrender, and when we gathered on the local football ground, soldiers started appearing from behind the hedges that surrounded the football ground, and we recognized many familiar faces, lots of our neighbors. And some of them were very abusive, while others tried to pretend that they didn't know what was going on. Some people were called out, taken to the local school, which was next to the football ground, and they were, beaten up. We could hear their screaming. We could hear the clatter of tables and chairs flying across the classroom. We could hear their torturers yelling at them. And what goes through your mind is, am I going to be next? Families were being split. One family member ended up in one camp, other family members ended up in other camps, and my brother Kasim and I were taken to this place called Omarska. It was a former iron ore mine. And I thought at that moment, this is it. The reason they brought us here at night is to execute us and to bury us. Luckily, it didn't happen. We were ordered off our buses and we were crammed inside. And a couple of people were killed. I don't know why those people were killed, but most of us, we were just verbally abused and just locked inside these rooms. And after about 2 weeks, the process of interrogation started. Police interrogators were local people. They were their former colleagues or former neighbors. The guards themselves were local people. I recognized most of them. Some of them went to school with me. Some of them were policemen in the Omarska village. One of the guards was one of my primary school teachers. One of the interrogators was my middle school teacher. And it was this personal nature of my camp experience that has been the hardest for me, even to this day. As time went on, we were being less and less their neighbors and human beings. We were slowly being demonized, which in a way enabled those gods to start killing their former friends and former neighbors. This has taught me that there's a very thin line between becoming a perpetrator or a victim. It all depends on the situation that we find ourselves in. Most people who are lucky enough not to have my experience will not believe this, but this is possible not just in my village, in my town. This is possible, wherever human beings live. When I was finally released from the second camp, I realized that I was not a free person. I was allowed physical freedom of movement, but in my head, suddenly all those questions started tormenting me. Why? What I realized was it was important to accept that these events did happen. So when I accepted that I have survived these terrible atrocities, I was able to move on. And I describe myself as becoming a survivor, whereas before that I was a victim. And I decided to go back to Bosnia in 2002, on the 10th anniversary of the attack on my village. And I wanted to speak to my middle school teacher who interrogated me in the camp. I just wanted to understand what happened with him. Why did this very nice teacher, whom I liked very much when I was in school, become a perpetrator of terrible crimes? So we had this conversation where I didn't blame him for anything, yet I wanted to understand how he became involved in everything that went on. And he didn't want to accept any responsibility for his part in it. He was saying it's ridiculous to discuss whose fault it was, we were all equally guilty, and so on. So I was thinking about forgiveness for many, many years, and I was tormented by this thought, how can I forgive people like himself who show no remorse whatsoever? Surely they must know what they did was wrong. So 6 years after this encounter with my former teacher, after 6 years of thinking about forgiveness, I was having a shower and it just came out of me. I forgive you. Not just himself, but others who nearly claimed my life as well. And that was a huge moment in my life, because I felt this huge burden that I carried on my shoulders all those years, disappearing. And I never expected this moment to happen, because I realized I did something big for myself. I said, I forgive you. I never, spoke these words in front of them, and I felt I became a free person. It was the moment when I gave myself a new lease of life.